This tutorial video will be going through the Cameras tab of the Hardware Setup panel. Within Live Mode of Cortex, you can find the Hardware Setup panel to the left-hand side of the window. The Hardware Setup panel is comprised of 4 tabs, the top of which being the Cameras tab, which will be the center of focus of this video, along with the Analog tab, Devices tab, and Cam Track tab. Starting at the top with the general camera configurations, this would be the location that you can change the frame rate, the shutter speed of the cameras, reboot every camera within the system, focus each individual camera, and change the focal length and orientation that the cameras are set. The frame rate, or the amount of frames per second, also commonly referred to as the sampling rate, or the amount of hertz that are collected within the motion capture system, can be adjusted either up or down depending on the desired frame rate. Depending on the camera style that you have, frame rate can be maximized at full resolution, but does vary per camera model. If you have any questions about how much or what frame rate your camera series can collect at, please feel free to reach out to our customer support team at support@motionanalysis.com. Moving down within the list, we then can find the shutter speed location, which would be the amount of time that the shutter is allowed to be open for the camera. This would effectively allow or change the amount of light that is seen within the camera itself. The more time that the shutter is allowed to be open would allow more light into the camera, and the less time that the shutter is allowed open would be the less time or less light allowed into the sensor, which would create a darker image. Moving past rebooting all of the cameras, which is something that needs to be clicked on twice, we will move into the insight focusing, which can be done for each individual camera. This window will then display, and then as the cameras become focused, a green square will populate to be as large as the outside edges of this window. Once that green square becomes stable without any movement, as stable as possible, best being said, would indicate that the camera is best focused to that portion of the volume. And then you can move on to the next camera. Just below that, we can then find the camera aiming tab, which would then be the focal length settings and the position or orientation within the volume that the cameras are set to. The focal length and the lens settings are individualized per camera, and again, you should reach out to our support team at support@motionanalysis.com if you have any questions about the specific lenses you have on site. These are integral settings as far as going through the calibration and are further discussed within the calibration video. If we move over to the position, one thing to note is that the aspect or the perspective of the cameras would always be in front of the cameras and not to the sides or from the perspective of the camera itself. So if we look at it from the center of the camera, we then would see the positioning and how that is relative to the volume. Once these changes are implemented, a reboot of the system would be needed, and then a new calibration would need to be performed. Position settings include upright, upside down, leaning left, and leaning right, which would be the perspective of the camera in the volume itself. Moving down to the selected camera settings, these settings would be adjusted per individual camera, but can also be adjusted per each selected camera. It's recommended to move this one at a time because each camera is individualized within the setup. Starting at the top with the thresholding number, this would be the value set within pixels that a marker would be passed within the system. A good starting point would be at 500, which would be directly in the middle, moving up or down depending on the markers and the space in the volume. Just below that, you can find the brightness settings, which are the ring light brightness for the Kestrel, Ospreys, and Raptor cameras. These can be adjusted all the way from no LED brightness being omitted, so the ring lights being effectively shut off, to 100% brightness with the ring light being omitted at 100%. It is best to try and find the best point for both thresholding and brightness that would satisfy the system in order to capture only markers within the intended volume. Moving just below that, you can find the centroid diameter limit, which would be the minimum and maximum horizontal line in pixels that would allow a marker into the system. So in this instance, we have a minimum of 2 horizontal pixels all the way up to 30 horizontal pixels being considered a marker. Anything that would be 1 pixel in diameter or 31 pixels in diameter would then be excluded from being considered a marker within the calculations of Cortex. There are adjustments that can be made to the centroid diameter limit, as this can be seen below within the centroid asymmetry limit in pixels. This would account for any asymmetry seen within the markers due to obstruction or the camera not seeing the marker as a circular spherical entity. This can be adjusted either up or down, and depending on the setup, can be either a good item to have higher or lower. A good starting point for this would be, in my opinion, 8. Just below that, you can also have show in the 2D display. So if we were to select that, hit spacebar, we then would have these items displayed within our 2D view as well, as these images would also want to be reflected within the 2D view itself. If you have any other questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to our customer support team. Again, our email is support@motionanalysis.com.